Yossi Mekelberg is an Associate Fellow of the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. He joins us now. Thanks for coming on the programme, Yossi. So let's start with those indirect talks in Doha, which seem to be focused on a ceasefire framework. I mean, what does a possible deal look like to you?
Good afternoon. Well, the parameters of any plan or any agreement are known. It's about, at the end of the day, ending the war, ceasefire, at least for 60 days, the release of hostages, release of Palestinian prisoners, and then moving towards complete end of the war. But there also a question, for instance, the presence of the Israeli Defense Force in some parts of Gaza, whether it's temporary or more permanent, whether Israel is maintaining some of the corridors, the Morag and Philadelphia corridors, who is providing the humanitarian aid, and whether Hamas leadership is going into exile or not. So those are quite a few sticking points there. But the basic parameters is a ceasefire, release of hostages, and release of Palestinian prisoners.
The US president had seemed very confident about an early deal this week, but there's not been a breakthrough on the hostages or a ceasefire. How much clout do you think Trump has?
I think he has clout, but the question if he wants to put pressure mainly on Netanyahu, and at the same time also the other mediators, the regional one, also to put pressure on Hamas. The thing is that the interest of the people, whether the Palestinians or the Israeli people, is not exactly or sometimes diametrically opposite of their leaderships. The leadership that both fail their people are fighting for their own survival, political survival, and at the same time they sacrifice the interests of their own people, which is basically ending the war. Netanyahu, on the one hand, is afraid to lose his coalition in case of his signing agreement because the ultranationalists say so. They leave the coalition. Hamas, they go into exile, and they don't know what's going to be their fate if they release all the prisoners or go into exile. And that's a big question, how the international community, and in this sense, Trump, especially now that Prime Minister Netanyahu visits Washington, is ready to put this pressure.
I wonder what you think has changed. I mean, do you think there's a sense that the recent 12-day war between Israel and Iran has created more favourable circumstances to end the Gaza war?
I think it changed the dynamics and also the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump. I think the conditions are ripe for a while, but definitely now that Israel in many ways completed war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, almost there, the situation in Syria changed. Hamas as a military force has been diminished considerably. Then the big question is in Iran. It's both its ability to launch missiles, its ability to defend itself from the air, and also its nuclear capability being at least damaged to a certain extent. There are favorable conditions to reach an agreement, but the question is also what kind of an agreement? When we still hear about so-called voluntary migration, when we hear about humanitarian space, those are all euphemisms of basically forcing Gazan people out of Gaza, and this will make it more difficult to accept to have an acceptance among Palestinians, but also within the region.
Yossi Mekelberg at Chatham House, thank you very much indeed.